Hi guys, the topic for this video is how to find the gradient of a line. So what is a gradient? A gradient just basically means how steep a line is. So for example, if you look at these images here at the bottom, we have someone who's riding their bike on a very shallow surface. It isn't that steep. It isn't on a hill. So we can say that's an example of a small gradient, okay? And the other image here, we have someone who's ice skiing down a mountainous hill, okay, and that hill is very, very steep. So we can say that's an example of a very large gradient, okay? Now, mathematically, using examples of straight lines on a graph, the red line, as you can see, is more steep than the blue line, okay? So you can say the red line has a larger gradient than the blue line, okay? So a big gradient gives a steep line, and a small gradient, we say, it gives us a shallow line or a less steep line, okay? Um, so as you can see here, this red line is a positive gradient. And the reason why we call this sort of line a positive gradient is because if you read the graph from left to right, it's going upwards. The line is going upwards. And this blue line here, if you read the graph from left to right, like you see it when you read a book from left to right, you don't read it from right to left, do you? So if you read this line, okay, from left to right, you can see that the blue line is actually going downwards. So that's an example of a negative line. So the red line has a positive gradient because it's going upwards from left to right. And the blue line has a negative gradient because it's going downwards from left to right. Okay, so please make a note of this. So this is a great way to just kind of tell immediately that a line would be positive or negative. So if it's going upwards, positive gradient. If it's going downwards, negative gradient. Okay. Um, so which of these lines here has a positive gradient? Okay, pause the video. Have a go. Which one is it? Okay. Which of these lines has a positive gradient? So A, as you can see, is going from left to right, it's going upwards. B is going downwards. C is going downwards, and D is going upwards. So the lines that have positive gradient are A and D, because if you read it, the graph from left to right, the line is actually going upwards. Okay, so it must have a positive gradient. It can't be negative. It can't have a minus sign. What about these ones here? Which of these lines has the negative gradient? Okay, I'll let you have a go. Which one is it? Okay, so let's just quickly go through this. A, it can't be negative because it's going upwards. Okay, so A is a positive, so it can't be that one. B is actually a negative gradient. C is also negative gradient, and D is a positive gradient. So B and C are the only two lines with negative gradients. Now the question said, which of these lines has the smallest negative gradient? Okay, it would have to be B because it's less steep. Okay, remember what we said, for gradient, the more steep it is, the larger the gradient. So here, for the smallest negative gradient, it would have to be B because it is less steep compared to the negative gradient C. Okay, so how to find a gradient? If you need to find a gradient of a line, you just pick 2 points. You pick two coordinates. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to find a gradient of a line between 2 points or two coordinates. The way to do this, okay, you write down these steps. So step one, to find a gradient of a line, you pick 2 points. Step two is you have to divide the difference in y by the difference in x. And I'm going to show you an example. Just copy down these steps for now. And then step three, after you work out the difference in y and the difference in x, you divide them together, and that'll be your gradient. Okay, so let's look at an example. So let's say I had a straight line and I picked 2 points. My 2 points are 1, 2, and 6, 12. Okay, so I need to find a gradient of this line. So I'll pick these 2 points. So what do? You find a difference in the y values. So the y coordinates are 12 and 2. So 12 minus 2 is 10. So it says that the colors are here to help us remember that if you start with green minus red, you must keep with green minus red, okay? So it doesn't matter if you do red minus green or green minus red, just don't change it halfway through, and otherwise you won't get the same answer, okay? So what it's basically saying to you here is, we could have done, to have a difference in y values, we could have done actually 2 minus 12. It doesn't really matter. but that would mean when you're working out the x values, you'd have to do 1 minus 6, okay? So let's keep it consistent. We done 12 minus 2, we done green minus red, okay? So 12 minus 2 is 10. Then we work out the difference in the x values. We do 6 minus 1, which is 5. Then what do we do to work out the gradient? Well, the gradient is the difference in y divided by the difference in x. So it would be 10 divided by 5, which is 2. And that's how you work out the gradient. We can actually double check. If we do it the other way around, we would get the same gradient. So if we do the difference in y, doing it the other way around, 2 minus 12 is minus 10, okay? And the x value is 1 minus 6 is minus 5. Minus 10 divided by minus 5 would give you positive gradient 2 because negative divided by negative is positive, okay? All right. Moving on. So the gradient of the line between these 2 points is 2. What I'd like you to do now is following the same example, pause the video and have a go at finding the gradient of 3, 5, and 620. Okay, so please pause the video, then press play when you're ready to carry on. Okay, let's just quickly go through this. So we do the difference in y values, 20 minus 5 gives me 15. Then we do the difference in x values, 6 minus 3 is 3. Okay, then what do we do to work out the gradient? We do the difference in y divided by the difference in x. 15 divided by 3 gives me 5. And there you go. So this particular gradient has a positive gradient of 5. Okay? All right. One more. Have a go. Now it has a negative. Okay. Well, I would go through this with you. So the difference in y values would be 12 minus 8 would give you 4. And then the difference in x now, you have to be careful here. It is 1 minus minus 3, okay? Because remember the minus 3, there's a minus 3 there, okay? And a minus and a minus, whenever you have a minus and a minus next to each other, what does it become? It becomes a plus. So 1 minus minus 3 is actually 1 plus 3, which is 4, okay? Then what do we do to add the gradient? We do the difference in y divided by the difference in x. So it would be 4 divided by 4, which is 1. So the gradient of this line, okay, between these 2 points is 1. Please copy down this example, okay, and watch out for the negative signs. You're doing minus a negative number. When you're doing a minus a negative number, a minus and a minus becomes a positive plus, okay? So this is a perfect example with a negative number. What I would like you to do is to pause the video and using the same example, the same procedure in example 3, work out the gradient of these 2 points, 0, 8, and 6 minus 4. So please pause the video, then press play when you're ready to carry on. Okay, just quickly going through this, we work out the difference in y values first. We start again, minus 4, minus 8. Minus 4, minus 8, you should be comfortable calculating negative numbers, okay? It gives you minus 12. And then the difference in x values would be 6 minus 0, which is 6. Then the difference in y divided by the difference in x would be minus 12 divided by 6, which is minus 2. Okay, so the gradient of this line now, it has a negative gradient of minus 2. Okay, so please correct it if you made a mistake. What I'd like you to do now is to copy down this example. So one of my coordinates has a negative and my other coordinate also has a negative value as well. So how can we go about this? So find a difference between the y values. You do minus 5 minus 10 would be minus 15. Then you find a difference between the x values. It would be 3 minus minus 2, which is 5. Okay. Then to work out the gradient of this one, it would be the difference in y divided by the difference in x would be minus 15 divided by 5. 15 divided by 5, we know it's 3, but because there's a minus feet, because it's minus 15 divided by 5, it would be minus 3. So the gradient of this line here between these 2 points would be negative 3. Okay. So please make sure you copy down this example. All right. What I'd like you to do now is to pause the video and have a go at these questions, finding the gradient of these 3 points here. Okay. So please pause the video, have a go, then press play when you're ready to carry on. Okay. These are the answers here. Okay. Please correct it. if you made a mistake, and give yourself a tick if you got the correct answer. Thank you so much for listening.